Okay, hello everybody. A bit more of the same, and yet it's not quite the same, but that's always our human skeleton. And here we are. I'm showing you the back of our bodies. The spine from the 7 neck vertebrae through to the 12 thoracic dorsal vertebrae, along the long, strong stretch of the 5 lumbar, only 5, there's 7 in the neck. And then, of course, the 5 fused vertebrae with the tailbone attached at the end. So, as you're sitting on a chair, or if you want to do that in standing, that's okay. When you hear the word spine, does your thought go to a specific area? Does that thought just go to the lumbar area? Sorry, that's wrong. Does that thought ever include that long stretch of 12 vertebrae, having of course the ribs attached? Do you ever think of the spine in this bit jutting out that we call neck? I have people who come and say they have no problems with their backs. Again, back and spine is not quite the same. The back is the opposite of the front, but nevertheless, they say they just have pain in the neck. So, what we're going to explore a bit is how these different segments of the spine, having slightly different shapes, inwards, outwards, like 2 S-curves, but how they interact in everyday life, and also what the function is of this long, very articulated line of bones with the discs in between that act like joints. Okay, I'm putting this one down again somewhere, and I would like you to just sit now if you have been standing on the chair. Notice what you're sitting on. Of course, it's a chair via your pelvis. Notice your 2 sit bones, ischias, sits bones in American, I think you call it, English. And notice how you load them. One more, one less, one forward, one backward. Are you rolled back on them or rolled very much forward? So don't correct, just notice. And here I haven't got more of the spine, that's just the last of the lumbar. But you can imagine now the spine going right up to the head. So, on top of the sit bones, the pelvis, we have the bridge called lumbar spine that connects the pelvis to the next big building block, which is the rib cage. And if you were a child and had to build a tower with some building blocks, then you would probably try, unless you are a very new builder, to put the next building block on top of the lower one so that the tower stands. So is your rib cage above the pelvis or in front of the pelvis or behind the pelvis? What's the shape of the bridge that we call lumbar spine, the bridge that connects the big building block pelvis to the big building block rib cage? And then we go up through the thoracic spine, and now notice the head. Is the head in any way connected to your sit bones? Or I could say, is the head in front of your rib cage or behind the rib cage? Is your head in front of the pelvis or behind the pelvis? And you say, I don't know, which is fair enough. And then think of your neck, that beginning of the spine, the 7 vertebrae. And that's another bridge that connects the rib cage to the head. So our spine has 2 bridges, the lumbar spine, connecting pelvis to rib cage, and the neck, or cervical spine if you want to be really fancy, and that connects the thoracic spine to the head. Now what I'd like you to do is just roll your pelvis a bit forwards and backwards, like we did in another session once. Roll your pelvis a bit forwards and roll the pelvis a bit backwards. And just observe, how do your building blocks, the pelvis, of course, is active now, so you have a clearer feeling. How does the rib cage, if at all, respond? The head has to have its freedom to be quiet or do something else, because think of walking. However, it should feel a support. So how does your spine, if at all, change its shape? And how can we know that? Okay, then rest again. I'm now introducing you to a very, hopefully not confusing, but unusual concept. There's an ordinary paperback book. It doesn't matter what kind of book it is. I've chosen a paperback because the spine is more flexible. Every book has a spine. And the paperback, and since it's my book, I can mistreat it a bit more than my husband's books. The spine of the book can move slightly backwards, although it's straight, but interesting thing, it moves inwards and slightly forwards if I open the book. Now we're introducing, in the book, the inner fold. You'll never be able to look at the book again without thinking sternum. When I'm closing the book and the spine of the book starts moving backwards, the sternum moves backwards. When I open the book and the spine starts coming forwards, can you see the sternum comes forwards? Then this book has, in the shape of the cover, 2 collarbones. And just bear with the idea. And then the inner page and the rest of the pages we can ignore, whatever. 2 shoulder blades, that's the collarbones. I'm very sorry. The flap, the cover of the book are the 2 shoulder blades. And the inner part are the 2 collarbones. So when I'm opening and closing my book, I'm not just moving the spine of the book, I'm moving the sternum, I'm moving the shoulder blades together and apart, and I'm moving the collarbones together and apart. The book, of course, has a rigidity, it shouldn't bend, so bear with me, every image that we use has a limitation in itself, but for our purpose I think the book is as good as anything. So, can you please put one hand, doesn't matter which hand, and straddle your collarbones. The thumb on one collarbone and how many fingers, whatever, on the other collarbone. By the way, we humans and apes are the only mammals that have collarbones. Horses, as you should know, haven't got collarbones. Birds have collarbones again, so in that structure we are closer to birds than to horses. Now I would like you to roll your pelvis again and simply monitor very lightly with your fingers touching your collarbones whether there is any response, any echo, any shift of the collarbones moving in relationship to one another, closer together or further apart. Don't invent it, just feel. If you, and I'm coming back to this, so don't worry if you haven't felt anything, should you feel something, and you feel these collarbones, I'm not telling you which way it goes at the moment, if you feel your collarbones moving, can you draw your attention to your shoulder blades, to the cover of your book? Can you feel your shoulder blades moving in relationship to one another? Just take that thought. Can you feel, you can take the hand down or use your other hand, your sternum doing anything? The answer might be yes, the answer might be I wish, the answer might be I have no idea, or the answer might be no. So whatever your answer is, you're not a bad person and you're not lost in the field of your bones and whatever field of gravity, so just bear with me. A little physical, laws of physics explanation. When an extremity like a leg or an arm, and indeed Feldenkrais talks in that sense of the head being an extremity, moves in one direction, forwards or backwards, our torso, led by the spine, goes in exactly the opposite direction to keep us in balance. Think of a seesaw. You're going with your child or grandchild, in my case, to the swings and to there always the seesaw. The small child sits at the very end of the seesaw, up and down, up and down. To have a counterbalance, the adult, the heavier person, sits near the fulcrum. And as the child goes up there, the adult doesn't go that far down. Yet it's a perfect counterbalance for the child, and then it changes over, to feel that balance. And our torso, led by the spine, is this counterbalance to our extremities. In walking, in any activity where we have the desire not to fall over or stay balanced. So, again, come back to the idea. I'll show you the spine again. I click down for it. You can see it. There we are. A connected unit with different segments that have slightly different functions, but I won't go into that now. As you're starting to move from here with the pelvis, rolling at the sit bones, you're moving that part of the spine, but it doesn't stop there, depending on, not even depending on the size, depending on the transparency of your skeleton, the movement of what's happened down there travels along here, doesn't stop here, travels along here. And then we have a choice with the head, as we have to have, otherwise we'll be dizzy if the head was thrown into every equation of the rest of the body. And then you have the shoulder blades. And I'm very sorry, I just go and fetch the other picture. Okay. And this is us from the front, and here are a bit straight there, here it's only a model, the collarbones. So, forces that enter the body dissipate, spread through the body from bone to joint to bone to joint. Depending on the size of the movement, it will be a more powerful spread or a weaker spread, but it's ideally not ever a question of fixing some parts because we don't know if we need them. Feldenkrais says in every movement, or any movement better, all bones should be ready, I think I said that before, for action if needed. So in our movement, as you're rocking the pelvis, the movement travels along the lumbar spine, along the thoracic spine, from bone to joint, the bone to joint. We have now a choice. The moment we have the ribs, we can say the movement goes to the rib cage. It goes along the thoracic spine. Here we are again. Haven't got enough hands. And it also dissipates along the ribs and comes to the sternum. The next bone joint area are the collarbones. The collarbones right up here and here, sorry, you can see that, my arm was in the way, are connected to shoulder blades at the back. And we have this ball and socket joint carved out of the shoulder blade, well the socket, and then our arms come down here. So, is there a reason why your collarbones, as a result of your pelvic rocking, shouldn't move? Could you think again now, and now making it a bit more prescribed, as you put your hand here, and you rock your pelvis, and you close your book a bit, the spine moves backwards. Notice what that does to the sternum. Notice what it does to the collarbones. I exaggerate slightly. Notice what it does there for the shoulder blades. And then the head we leave out of the picture. When I open my book by rolling the pelvis forwards, and I exaggerate slightly, can you see what happens? Via the lumbar spine, the thoracic spine, the ribs, the sternum comes forwards. That means the collarbones being attached to the sternum on either side have to spread, move apart. Because they're up here connected to the shoulder blades, like in the book, come closer together. And that's the bony circuit. So if the collarbones don't have even a very small, modest acknowledgement of what happens with the pelvis, the chance is that along this line of transmission of forces, muscles are holding and blocking the movement going through. And that's not the end of the world, but it might be the reason why someone has some pain somewhere. And one very interesting part that blocking happens, sorry, I'm going to the other picture again, not the best for this, but there we go. Very important blocking part is first of all here, that we cut the pelvis off from the spine. Another important blocking part is when we have the transition from the thoracic spine to the thoracic spine, the lumbar spine, or lumbar spine to thoracic spine. And when that doesn't move, there's no reason for the sternum to move, for the collarbones to move, for the shoulder blades to move. So let's start from this end. Have your hands again straddling your collarbones, and now decide you would like these collarbones to come a bit closer together. They can only come closer together if your sternum moves backwards out of the way. Notice what that means for the shoulder blades, when you feel them moving apart. And then let your collarbones move way apart. And notice what that means for your sternum. It's coming forwards. Because it's connected, the collarbones are attached to the sternum at one end, and the tip of the shoulder, not the tip, the top of the shoulder blade at the other end. So when the collarbones move apart, the sternum comes forward, then you feel the shoulder blades coming closer together. Now, as you start the movement from here, because you can throw, we talked about the pebbles last time, pebbles into the water from any end, does your thoracic spine, do your ribs move? Does your lumbar spine, so please put one hand in the lumbar spine, echo that action, and I exaggerate so you can see it, that action of the collarbones. And if the lumbar spine moves, is the transition from the lumbar spine to the sacrum, i.e. the pelvis, open for business, and you suddenly feel your sit bones moving. As opposed to this, or from the other end, this. Nothing's happening. So, understanding the bony connection, that's our lot in nature, understanding the transmission of forces going ideally from bone to joint and not via muscles, understanding that it's only muscles, apart from having a break somewhere, bone broken, that stop the transmission of forces going through. Can we have the patience, the curiosity, the understanding for ourselves of where we might be less attentive to movement of the spine? I asked you earlier, when you hear the word spine, where does your attention go? And if you really want to feel the neck involved, at what point of this opening and closing of the collarbones would you lift your head? And of course the neck does exactly what the rest of the spine does. The collarbones move apart, the neck moves inwards or forwards, and that allows our head to lift. When the collarbones move together and the shoulder blades move apart, notice, if you want to move the head, that this is the moment to look down. So, of course, with the book image, that might get a bit complicated. I thought of the head as being the book sign, something like that. But simplify the image again. The book with its spine going inwards forwards, with the spine coming with backwards, although it's actually straight, but anyway, that's not the point. The sternum going forwards relative to the spine coming forwards. The sternum going backwards relative to the spine going backwards. The shoulder blades, when the spine is really, really forwards, coming together, whilst the collarbones are really, really apart because the sternum has come forward. And then the opposite. So I would like you now, with one hand, doesn't matter which hand, to pick up your reins. Picture your horse, the wither, the horse's head, and put your hands on the sternum. And now, of course, we are out on horseback. You can try it out on horseback at some point. Allow your pelvis to roll as it rolls on horseback, backwards and forwards. And maybe you have found out that when your pelvis rolls backwards and the spine moves internally backwards, not your body moves backwards, internally balancing out, the collarbones come together, the shoulder blades move apart, and I come and just explain the structure there a bit more. Your arms, where your arm goes forwards. When the opposite happens, the pelvis rolls forward, the spine moves forwards inwardly, the sternum comes forwards, the collarbones move apart, hopefully, the shoulder blades move together. Notice what happens with your arm. And do that a few more times. Feel the connection between your pelvic rolling and the collarbones moving. And notice, without you doing anything active with your arm, that the arm, in response, because it's another long bone, that's several bones, picks up the force traveling through, which then, if you had the reins in your hand, travel down the reins with the horse's bit. Now for a few moments, roll your pelvis, but fix your collarbones. And nothing happens with your arms. So then you have to do something separate with your arms, which very often is totally separate from what else goes on. I may not have explained clearly enough the structure here. So I'm just coming back to that because it's crucial in that it is helpful to see that structure. And again, I'm sorry I haven't got the 3D thing, it's this. So we have the shoulder blades lying at the back, and I'm taking this thing down in a moment. And the shoulder blade has a little lip over the top of the upper arm, the humerus, probably for protection. And up here, you can't see it very well, the collarbone connects to the shoulder blade. If you see it from the front, you can just see the little lip of the shoulder blade that I showed you before, and there's a shoulder blade lying at the back. There's the collarbone going from the shoulder blade, attaching to the top of the sternum. If you want to be fancy, it's called the manubrium. And out of the shoulder blade, which is formed sideways clear of the ribs, so our arms won't bash against our ribs. When we were made, I always think of an ice cream scoop before the bones were formed, that scooped out a little hollow for the arm. Doesn't fit in very well, not as well as down here, for the purpose of more freedom, but that's the ball rolling in the socket. So the bony connection coming up the spine, going via ribs to the sternum, from the sternum to the collarbones, from the collarbones to the shoulder blades, and from the shoulder blades down the arms. So if anything up here, for whatever reason, is not part of the movement on horseback, your arms are left to their own device. And then they suddenly do things that the horse does with its front head, because the horse is abundant, so are your arms. So the discipline, if that's the right word, of connecting arm movement to what happens down here, your one bony contact with riding, is hugely important to keep this whole thing as a connected, interactive unit. So try again, maybe change your hands over or maybe not, it's up to you. and pick up your reins. Let your imaginary horse roll the pelvis. Notice if you lose uprightness. Have you got a tendency of doing this? Then think of the book. The book doesn't do that. So can you open and close your book on horseback and just have a feeling of how that quite miraculously impacts on what happens with your arms. And that's an individual question. Where do you feel the movement stops? Where does it become a cerebral kind of activity? Or I move my arm and I must learn by heart where my sit bones are to know where my arms are and so on. It's impossible. But of course, play around. We are an organic unit inside the large organic unit of the universe. Okay. And then again, let it be for a moment and rest. You could also start the movement by saying, I start the movement with my arms, with my reins. Again, if it helps you to touch with one hand your own body, feel free. I do it to try and clarify things. So I'm putting my hand on my sternum, going up a bit towards the collarbones. My hand's not quite big enough. And I'm doing this. How far do I need to go before my pelvis knows what I'm doing? And I'm doing that. How far do I have to move the arm before there's an echo? There's no textbook that tells you how far. So it's a personal question. And the more transparent my skeleton is, the quicker the response is and the less big a movement I have to make for the pelvis to quiver a bit. So that action, as opposed to this action. The arm forward, the spine backwards. The arm backwards, the spine, the book opening, collarbones apart, shoulder blades together, sternum forward, spine moving forwards, inwards, pelvis rolling this way. It's all given. We don't have to invent it. We just have to relate to it. And again, in terms of balance, if my arms, I take both arms, go forwards and nothing goes backwards to balance out, at some point I can't go further forwards, or worse, I take my spine also forwards and I'm off. If I balance out with my spine, as I said earlier, with a seesaw, the adult at the fulcrum, my arms come forwards. And as my arms come backwards, that's the response. The arms are not elastic because they're long bones. The elasticity comes from the interaction with the spine. To go further with riding, sometimes I know balance has these easy reins that they invented to give people that feeling of give. But if they only feel it in the arms, that's a lost cause. That ease of give is there to hopefully, because you want to stay balanced, suddenly make the whole interaction of your whole bony structure clearer. The part of the pelvis that doesn't go up along the spine and needs the spreading of the power of our pelvis, it is also the movement of going downwards. So at the moment, for the ease of the whole situation, I've decapitated and taken the most of the spine away from this person. As you know, and you can see in this picture, the pelvis is actually a kind of piggy in the middle. It's wedged between our whole spine and whatever is attached to it, which I mentioned before, but it's also wedged between our two legs via these hip joints. For the pelvis to be free to absorb movement coming from horseback or just movement in wherever we need to move the pelvis, the absorption of the movement upwards and also downwards is important. Because if one end of the pelvis is fixed in the joint and the movement doesn't get passed on, then the pelvis has a hard time. And that's very often when riders start compensating with extra movement in the lumbar spine. Because the brain says, we can't move here, let's go to these movements. So, as you're sitting on the chair, if you have a chair where you can sit astride, you can. I just sit on this stool and go a bit like this. As I roll my pelvis forwards and backwards, I haven't got the leg here, but there will be the leg. And as I roll my pelvis forwards and backwards, I'm nudging the top of my femur, the ball, which of course is attached, as you can see, like with the arm, to the long, thickest bone in the human body, our thigh, and beyond. So please put your hands, if you don't want to sit astride, that's fine, put your hands on your thighs. And as you roll your pelvis forwards and backwards now, allow your collarbones to open and close, allow your book to work. Is there any action, small but important, in your thighs, in the direction of your knees? Please, for whatever you have felt, could you fix your thighs? Do not allow your thighs to know what your pelvis is doing. Every other bone can move. And notice what happens. If I fix my thighs, and you see the pelvis can't move, and then I put more movement into this area, very often to the detriment of this area, the muscles here, people then have back pain, then they go and have their back treated. Pointless unless they know the cause of it. So, don't fix your legs anymore, and maybe through the fixing there's a greater desire from your nervous system to move. Allow your thighs to respond. When the pelvis rolls forwards and the sockets come forwards, quite rightly the next bone is being pushed forwards. When the socket rolls back, and they, hopefully they're attached in the joint, and the pelvis rolls back, the thigh moves back. So as the pelvis rolls forward, the arrow of the thigh movement is outwards. It's a slight forwardness, and if you sit astride, a tiny bit of a openness. These are thoughts. And when the pelvis rolls back, the opposite happens. So, start the movement with your legs. Let's exaggerate. Move your legs forwards and open them a bit without falling off. And notice what the pelvis has to do. Notice what your collarbones have to do. Maybe there is a nice image between the collarbones moving backwards, inwards, and the thighs. The pelvis, to have that freedom of rolling, needs the thighs to get out of the way. So, in riding or in everyday life, tight leg muscles will stop the pelvis from doing its job. And then it can't oscillate upwards either, and then suddenly, because the pelvis is such a major point in our body, if the pelvis can't move, then basically a lot of it is fixed or moves regardless of other parts. So, hands on your thighs, feel your pelvis pushing your thighs forwards a bit, and allow yourself to exaggerate, and a bit backwards. And think of the whole spine responding, think of your ribs responding, think of your sternum responding, feel your collarbones, your shoulder blades, and again the head. If you want to look up, the moment will come when your legs go in one direction. I won't tell you which one, and in the other direction. Okay, bony circuit in the body. There should be fun with all this, otherwise what's the point? The fun of letting the bony circuit and the balancing of the bones inside your body, this bag of bones we are, happen and take place is of course that we become more childlike. And one of the things that children do is roll on the floor. I spent yesterday with my 8-year-old granddaughter. She's quite a gymnastics fan, so she does things I wouldn't dream of doing anymore. But we had to watch her father play cricket, which was a bit boring, but this 8-year-old, just by the edge of the boundary, was spending about 2 hours on and off just rolling around on the floor and doing backward flips and forward flips. Of course we don't do that now, but just the sheer pleasure of seeing that was wonderful. And I didn't want to disgrace myself and join her on the floor on the cricket pitch. Oh. But I roll around at home. So one thing is that you can lie on your back. First of all, again think of your head, your neck, part of the spine, the long thoracic stretch with the ribs around sternum, and then on top of it superimposed the shoulder girdle, collarbone, shoulder blades, pelvis, and then the legs. So a very nice way of rolling is, if you pick and take one leg at a time, might be easier for the back, pick your legs up and just put your knees on your hands and just decide how could you roll to one side, how far you could roll, and just have fun, let the whole spine roll. When you come back, take one knee closer towards your chest, and then it rolls automatically to the other side, and then you take this knee closer to the chest. You may not want to go that far and just roll like this. You may want to keep your head in the middle and just roll like this. Just see how, even in this simple, safe position, if you want to be balanced and not have to go push or just crash, there has to be a balancing. So as my body goes to one side, this knee stays a bit behind. A counterbalancer, this time with the torso. Till it can go as well, and like there. And then the return, I start with this knee and go on and on and on and on and on. And hey presto, the spine follows like an obedient lap dog. And then I go to that side, and you find out that one side you'll be freer to move than on the other side. You can roll like this. You can also put your hands behind and really have a firm clasp and just throw your legs over your head, and when you come back, lift your head and rock to and fro, and it might be a surprise that you might find yourself, without forcing at some point, onto sitting. Have fun with that. Or, if that feels comfortable, you can hold your own feet. You can say, okay, I can't fall far. Can I roll to one side and roll on the back? And could I come back? Just roll, 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 roll. And you see how the whole skeleton follows. If I have part of my spine held and fixed, then it won't happen. Then I have to shove and push and hold my breath, go right in the face, or it won't work. If anything hurts, you don't do it. So I don't want to start showing off, which I can't anyway at my age. But this rolling around, or even just allowing yourself to lie like this and do a tiny circle with the pelvis on the floor, have fun doing that. Notice the effect of it. Can every part be, as my teacher once said, in any movement, every part is equally unimportant. I'm not meant to feel down my lumbar spine or my pelvis or my arms or something. It's just a wonderful unity, interplay of everything coming together. So this is a kind of the reward for discovering where we unwittingly do what I termed earlier on parasitic holding movement that doesn't contribute to the freedom, the purpose, the size of the action. Alright, till next time. Bye bye.